I think I want to reflect back a little bit. You know, when this pandemic started in early spring of 20, we didn't know what we were facing. We were facing a virus that thought we could carry and transmit and not even any symptoms. So we locked down the economy, we shut the economy down, and then on a bipartisan basis, we passed legislation to get liquidity out there to businesses and households to prevent a depression and just a total disaster. And you know, I think that program's worked pretty well. And then a year later, administration changed, and then we started come out with this new package of nearly $2 trillion. When there still was $1 trillion unspent from the previous packages that we passed in 20. And so now, you know, we've had the supply chain crisis, we've got a worker shortage crisis, and because those kind of go hand in hand, we saw the economy turning around before we passed this nearly $2 trillion. Things were getting better. One of the evidence that things were getting better because nobody expected demand to pick up as way as it did, so we had supply chain shortages because demand all of a sudden perked up, and I think we've seen some of that, some of the testimony already. And so what's happened, we got supply chain worker shortages, we paid people not to work, paid people to stay home, and then we put in another nearly $2 trillion into the economy this time a year ago, and to fuel that demand. So the textbook definition of inflation is too many dollars chasing too few goods and services, and that's exactly, I think, what happened. And then when you couple that on with this administration's energy policy, we just added to the inflationary crisis and all the way across the board, and putting more money into it, especially without guardrails, creates a huge problem. And I'll give you a couple examples. What we saw happen at the local level, at state level, here in, let's see, the unemployment checks for illegal aliens in New York State, lawmakers used nearly $2 billion of this rescue money to pay illegal aliens. They call it the Excluded Workers Fund. We also saw another example in Georgia. Surprise holiday stimulus payment of $6,300 went to medical students. And then according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, they also stated colleges and local governments have occasionally found themselves scrambling to find ways to spend these funds. I've seen that back in my state. Privately, I have county commissioners telling me, hey, we got a lot of money we don't know what to do with. Some of them have said, don't send us any more. You know, so, you know, I think what we've done here is we've funded a lot of wish lists and caused a lot of other problems. I'd like to state, I also see another example. Washington, D.C., Mayor Bowser used $70 million of this allocated state and local fund to transition homes to green energy. Was that really help with the pandemic when we have kids couldn't go to school, or was this an agenda? We also had different areas of the country using this funds for things like, why would that affect anything to help these people? So, Mr. Joff, would you agree that a lot of this funding has really been wasted and is really just answering a wish list that a lot of states and localities had before the pandemic, and now we just fully funded it, especially when we've seen states like California and Illinois that had massive deficits before the pandemic now have large surpluses?
Yes, it seems there were a lot of categories of possible spending. I think about 70 different categories, and many of them have little or nothing to do with pandemic relief or revenue loss replacement. So yes, there are pre-existing wish lists that are being fulfilled. In California, for example, a lot of the money went to homeless services, and yet we've been spending billions of dollars here in California on homeless services, and we're not taking care of the homeless problem. So it's not clear to me how this is really beneficial.
Would you agree, too, that this massive inflation we haven't seen in 40 years, I lived through the inflation of the President Carter years, and you know, how that affects, adds the cost, and people are, take-home wages are going down, their buying power is going down, and so, you know, we should really be addressing this inflationary cost and how we can address that. Of course, one reason I think we can address that is by opening the spigots here and producing energy again, and solves a lot of the problems that we're seeing around the world. But that inflation, would you agree, causes massive hardships to families, more so than just giving a wishful list to our local governments? Mr. Joff?
Yes, definitely. It makes it harder for people to make ends meet.
Thank you. I yield back. I'm out of time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from